repeated. They looked at each other for a long, strained moment. Then the stranger said quickly, "But you love them, of course."
Page 74.
The father controlled his temper and said, biting off his words, "Of course." "Of course, of course," the stranger murmured, tugging at his necktie and loosening his collar. "Otherwise it would all come to an end." The two men were of approximately the same height, but the father was heavier in the shoulders and torso. His hair had thinned more severely, so that the scalp of the crown was exposed, flushed, damp with perspiration, sullenly alight. With a stiff avuncular formality, the stranger shook the son's hand. "So this is your room now. So you live here now," he murmured, as if the fact were an astonishment. Not used to shaking hands, the boy was stricken with shyness and cast his eyes down. The stranger limped past him, staring. The same. Walls, ceiling, floor, window. He drew his fingers slowly along the windowsill, around the frame, rapped the glass, as if, again, testing materiality.
Mark that.
Stooped to look outside. But it was night, and nothing but his reflection bobbed in the glass, ghostly and insubstantial.
Mark that.
He groped against the walls. He opened the closet door before the mother could protest. He sat heavily on the boy's bed, the springs creaking beneath him. He was panting, red-faced, dazed. "And the ceiling overhead," he whispered. He nodded slowly and repeatedly, smiling. "And the floor beneath, that is what is." He took out his handkerchief again and fastidiously wiped his face. He made a visible effort to compose himself. The father, in the doorway, cleared his throat and said, "I'm afraid it's getting late. It's almost 6. The mother said, "Oh yes, I'm afraid it is getting late. There's dinner and the children have their homework." The stranger got to his feet. At his full height, he stood for a precarious moment swaying, as if the blood had drained from his head and he was in danger of fainting. But he steadied himself with a hand against the slanted dormer ceiling. He said, "Oh yes, I know. I've disturbed you terribly. You've been so kind." It seemed, surely, as if the stranger must leave now. But, as chance had it, he happened to spy on the boy's desk an opened mathematics textbook and several smudged sheets of paper, and impulsively offered to show the boy a mathematical riddle. "You can take it to school tomorrow and surprise your teacher." So, out of dutiful politeness, the son sat down at the desk, and the stranger leaned familiarly over him, demonstrating adroitly with a ruler and a pencil how what we call infinity can be contained within a small geometrical figure on a sheet of paper. First you draw a square, then you draw a triangle to fit inside the square. Then you draw a second triangle, and a third, and a fourth, each to fit inside the square, but without their points coinciding. And as you continue, "Here, son, I'll show you. Give me your hand, and I'll show you." The border of the triangle's common outline gets more complex and measures larger and larger and larger, and soon you'll need a magnifying glass to see the details, and then you'll need a microscope, and so on and so forth forever, laying triangles neatly down to fit inside the original square without their points coinciding. The stranger spoke with increasing fervor. Spittle gleamed in the corners of his mouth. The son stared at the geometrical shapes rapidly materializing on the sheet of paper before him, with no seeming comprehension, but with a rapt, staring fascination, as if he dared not look away.
Mark it.
After several minutes of this, the father came abruptly forward and dropped his hand on the stranger's shoulder. "The visit is over," he said calmly. It was the first time since they'd shaken hands that the two men had touched, and the touch had a galvanic effect upon the stranger.
Mark it.
He dropped ruler and pencil at once, froze in his stooped posture, burst into frightened tears. Now the visit was truly over. The stranger, at last, was leaving, having wiped away his tears and made a stoical effort to compose himself, But on the doorstep, to the father's astonishment, he made a final, preposterous appeal. He wanted to see the basement. Just to sit on the stairs, in the dark, for a few quiet minutes, and you could close the door and forget me. You and your family could have your dinner and... The stranger was begging, but the father was resolute. Without raising his voice, he said, "No, the visit is over." He shut the door and locked it. Locked it. His hands were shaking, and his heart beat angrily.
Mark it.
He watched the stranger walk away, out to the sidewalk, out to the street, disappearing in the darkness. Had the streetlights gone out? Behind the father, the mother stood, apologetic and defensive, wringing her hands in a classic stance. Wasn't that sad? Wasn't that sad? But we had no choice but to let him in. It was the only decent thing to do. The father pushed past her without comment. In the living room, he saw that the lights were flickering as if on the brink of going out. The patterned wallpaper seemed drained of color. A shadow lay upon it, shaped like a bulbous cloud or growth.
Mark it.
Even the robust green of the carpeting looked faded. Or was it an optical illusion? Everywhere the father looked, a pulse beat mute with rage. "I wasn't the one who opened the door to that man in the first place," the mother said, coming up behind the father and touching his arm. Without seeming to know what he did, the father violently jerked his arm and thrust her away. "Shut up. We'll forget it,"
Mark
he
it.
said. "But we'll forget it." The mother entered the kitchen, walking slowly, as if she'd been struck a blow. In fact, a bruise the size of a pear would materialize on her forearm by morning. When she reached out to steady herself, she misjudged the distance of the doorframe. Or did the doorframe recede an inch or two, and nearly lost her balance?
Mark it.
In the kitchen, the lights were dim, and an odor of sourish smoke, subtle but unmistakable, made her nostrils pinch. She slammed open the oven door, grabbed a pair of pot holders with insulated linings. "I wasn't the one," she cried, panting, "and you know it."
Now, the thing that makes this story so amazing, of course, is what we don't know. And in a classic Gothic text, this is often the case, right? So you want to ask obvious questions. Just start listing, for example, the questions that you would like to have answered that clearly are not going to get answered. Who is this guy? Why did he show up? Why does he first walk around the outside? And then when he does walk in the inside of the house, like, what is he looking for? Do we really know whether he actually lived in the house or not? Or is he just making that story up? Obviously, we have to ask about the mother and the father, and of course, the son as he's met. What exactly is going on in this story? At level 1, though, just summarize really quickly what happens, right? Again, it's kind of got a tripartite beginning, middle, and ending, right? The whole idea of the visit's over. You could have easily Oates could have called this story The Visit, but she decides to call it something quite different, right? The where is here will take us back, of course, to the idea of, on page 72, paragraph number 17, the riddles that apparently he played with his child. And one of those riddles is, where is here? It's kind of like in 303, the riddle games that we play. I dreamed I was a butterfly, and then I woke up and wondered, am I a butterfly dreaming I'm a human? And it is interesting why some students like little riddles like that, others not so much. And of course, playing around with triangles immediately makes us think of our study of Pythagoras and the whole notion of the ancient Euclidean tradition and all of that as well. So who is this person and what was he about? But what do you think is the message of the story? Notice how the energy in this family changes after the stranger leaves their house, and why that's the case. What is going on in terms of the stranger and the question of the energies in the house. For example, do you have a sense that this mother and father actually get on well and like each other? Or do you have a sense that in fact there is some acrimony, some antagonism between them, that the visit of the stranger kind of maybe just revealed in some way? Some have, of course, read the stranger as a villain. Some have read the stranger as even something more akin to an angel. You get to decide, because notice Oates doesn't actually tell us at all. For example, notice though, the stranger didn't want to go into the master bedroom where his father and mother slept, which tells us maybe something about the dynamics of the relationships. Maybe it says something about the dynamics of the relationships within the family house now. In other words, the question of what does it mean to say, I am here? There was a great philosopher, Heraclitus, that said you can never step into the same river twice because, of course, the Bighorn River is always flowing and therefore it's not the same river. Is that true of our lives, especially as we grow up and we grow out of the places where we live? Obviously, at 2B, we can think about what makes this story Gothic. Like, for example, is this a scary story to you? Some have read it as a scary story. Some have read it as not so scary, as more unsettling. It's not that it's scary, it's more unsettling. Like, I don't know enough about what's going on here to have an opinion, but I have a feeling. And often good Gothic texts, of course, Oates is classic at this, giving you a sense or a feeling of, what is that feeling? Can you come to it with an adjective, a good adjective? Like, is it dread? Is it uncertainty? And can you go back into the story and can you circle the words that for you kind of give that sense? Notice all the questions of the story. There are riddled through this story, if I can say it that way. At 3A, what are the other Gothic texts that we've already studied? For example, how does this story work with fall of the house of Usher, for example? To what degree? I mean, it is a story, you could argue. It is in some ways a story about a house. What about the text house taken over? To what degree do you have, in all three of these texts, you have a house that factors. And what is a house, after all? To what degree is a house what defines you? And in what ways does it define you? Of course, haunted houses are classic Gothic story motifs. What's your favorite Gothic or scary haunted house story or film or maybe even game that you've played? Finally, at 2B, how do you read this story? What do you think of this stranger? For example, would you allow the stranger into the house because he says he once lived there and he'd like to look around? Would you let him go to the basement? Would you let him continue to stay there? Would you invite him in? Or would you rather see him as an outcast? Again, this idea that we're kind of thinking a little bit about our Unit 1 and to Unit 2 that we've worked with. Is he an outcast? Is he an outsider? Or is he inside the nightmare, as Unit 1 is called? I'll leave it to you to decide. Thank you.